Sundays have always been sacred to me. It gives me a chance to spend time with my family, with my friends, to focus on my faith. And honestly, We Rest on Sundays is a platform that I've created to help you navigate the complexities of the world. I want to spend time having open, honest dialogue with mentors, friends and family, and individuals that I truly believe are exceptional. We're going to focus on love, career, marriage, parenting, and everything in between. And the primary goal here is for us to become the better versions of ourselves every single day. I want to thank you for tuning in. I'll see you on Sunday.
Green, thanks for being here, bro.
Absolutely.
I'm going to start by reading something to you. I asked I won't try to give away too many details, but I asked somebody just like, hey, give me a quick overview of Jay Green. And they actually went above and beyond and wrote like a little blurb. And then it was actually like another page and a half. So I won't go through the full page and a half. I'll go through the blurb.
Okay.
And I'll give you two guesses. And then I'll tell you who it is, if that's okay.
All right.
So Jonathan Green, a passionate advocate for community service and leadership, grew up on the south side of Chicago in a low-income neighborhood on Norman Avenue, raised by his mother alongside his older sister. Jonathan's early years were shaped by resilience and determination despite the absence of his father, who lived in Baltimore. Later in life, Jonathan rekindled his relationship with his father before his passing, a testament to his values of connection and forgiveness. A Hyde Park High School alum, Jonathan excelled in academics, participated in community service, and was a member of the football team, where he earned nickname Speedy. His involvement in local church anchored his family and fueled his passion for giving back. Jonathan continued his journey at Morehouse College, where he embraced his mission of ethical leadership and community service, joining the fraternity that further honed in his dedication to advocacy, brotherhood, and excellence. That's an amazing intro to you.
Yeah.
You have two guesses, man. So who do you think wrote?
There's a little bit of detail in there, so I feel like it has to be a line, brother.
Okay.
Am I warm?
You're warm.
Okay.
And I hate to give that away.
Yeah, I mean, the address dropped, the street name, so it has to be either, I won't say it has to be. Is it Hank?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
He jokes a lot about knowing Chicago because he lived there a while.
Uh-huh.
He thinks he knows the city, but yeah.
Man, like I kid you not, and you know Hank. So it's like I reached out to him. I was like, yeah, man, like I really want to get Speedy Jay Green on the platform. And I was like, but how do you think it's gonna land with him? He was like, oh, he'll be open for it. He was like, let me send you some stuff. And he sent me legitimately, it was like 2 pages of just information on you. And I was like, this dude, and I think he was out of the country as well. So I'm like, one, I appreciate it, but I wanted to share that because I think that like Black men, we don't always do the best job of like truly showing our admiration and appreciation for each other.
Yeah.
And even though that may have seemed like a small act of service, it was just exceptional for me to even read that about his line brother. And then obviously somebody I really admire and I respect. So again, man, I appreciate you being here. And a few additional thoughts as Hank threw out there. You're a Morehouse alum. You've overcome stark adversities. You attended graduate school. You lost a parent. You're a millennial that has stayed at the same employer for over 10 years now and climbed the ladder to make senior manager in a Big Four consulting firm. Your father, husband, mentor, friend, brother, driven, impactful leader. So again, thank you just for being here. But tell us more about who is Jonathan Green.
Yeah, I mean, and let me start off by saying what you're doing is powerful. So thank you for, bringing me along on this and being a part of this with you. But yeah, who is John Green? So as you mentioned, a lot of people know me by Speedy. That started in high school. We won't get into that story of how that came along. But so a lot of folks actually don't know my actual name, which is also hilarious. Yeah. But yes, grew up on the south side of Chicago with my mom and my sister. Coming up in Chicago, it's a beast of a city in and of itself. Navigating that city through high school, and growing up in Chicago, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so going through the years, you don't know that you don't have a lot. You don't know that what's lacking and what's missing because of the environment within the home. And so I say that to say, like, my mom was very intentional about having a happy home and us being happy and whatever that meant in her eyes, because I think that that can change from parent to parent. So we never felt like we were lacking. We never felt like, you know, we didn't have much. But that was the reality of it. So, you know, growing up in the city, it's a hard city to live in. I had not gone back because of the winters primarily. Those winter months are brutal.
Yeah.
But getting through, you know, going up through high school, she kept us involved. She kept me involved in programs. Grew up in the church as well. So the church had a very big impact in my life. And I think that's probably uniform across the Black community, where your church is your community. It's a source of help for families. It's a source of friendship. And it is the kind of the crux of community for Black people. So that's what it was for me. Grew up in the church. She was very intentional about us actively participating in church activities. Grew up in various clubs, boys and girls clubs. Ironically, there was a 4-H club, and if anybody knows what 4-H is, it's a version of boys and girls clubs, but usually out in more rural areas. But there was a gentleman who came back into the city to start that club. But long story short, it's a variation of a boys and girls club. So I was active participant in that up until the point where I was old enough where I could work there. So that was one of my first jobs early in high school, like maybe freshman year in high school, where he was like, you can get paid to just come back and be a mentor and kind of do all the things that the folks that were older than you at one time did. So that was sort of my first like job per se. It's almost like a camp counselor. But yeah, throughout high school, played football. That was just something to stay busy. Very interested in it. Love football. Not the most athletic person, so I knew it wasn't going anywhere beyond high school. But it was still fun while in high school. And then coming out of high school, or getting ready to come out of high school, trying to figure out what's next. And that's sort of what took the path to Morehouse, where there was a gentleman a year ahead of me who had come to Morehouse, and he came back and was like, this is the best place ever. You all have to go. And the running joke at the time, my close friend at the time, he and I applied because we knew Spelman was across the street. I had no intentions of going to Morehouse. I was absolutely, and if anyone knows me, they've heard this story. I was going to the University of Illinois for engineering. And that was the plan, to be an engineer, stay home, stay close to home. And going back to the point about church, the moment that my mother told everyone at church that I got into Morehouse, next thing I knew, the pastor paused everything on a Sunday morning and said, we've got great news that John is going to Morehouse.
Wow.
I had not made that decision. So the elders made that decision, and they knew what I didn't know at the time was that Morehouse is where I needed to be. So that's what took my journey to Morehouse.
So tell me more just about you mentioned Morehouse is where you needed to be, and like your father wasn't involved in the foundational years of you growing up. So how did you land on an all boys, historically Black college?
Yes, I think if I take that question in two parts, with not having my father around, there was always a level of mentors. What started off in church, there were two guys particularly that will always and forever be the examples of what I aspire to be. And despite, I mentioned, growing up in Chicago, being on the South Side, they had careers. They had families. They were a part of the church. And so through them, they took a liking to me and made sure that, I wasn't getting into trouble. So much so when I was ready to get my license, they both had their hands up saying, when are you ready to go learn how to drive? I'll take you to go get your license. So I had the examples there, right? And I think that was critical because when you start to bridge that to Morehouse, it is very much so a community that is there to bring young men into their adulthood. And so when you first get to Morehouse, there's examples everywhere, good and bad, but of what it means to grow up and grow into your adulthood. And so I think as you and even if we take it a step further, once you get beyond Morehouse, you feel that commitment and that responsibility to give back as well.
Mhm.
And it doesn't end with you. And so when I look at Morehouse, this is not an ad for Morehouse, but I think you talk to anybody that goes, the school doesn't want to see you fail.
Uh-huh.
And so when you take that back to growing up, the mentors and the good examples that I had, they did not want to see me fail.
Mhm.
And so it's very easy to fall into trouble. Growing up in a city like Chicago, it's very easy to get into trouble. So, they did everything that they could do to expose me to things, and that was a big key for me, was exposure,
Mhm.
being exposed to different things. The the best example that I have of that was meeting a young Barack Obama. When he was running for
Mhm.
senator. So still being in the city in high school at the time, going to see him speak, that alone was like, oh wow, this dude has power in his word, confident.
Mhm.
He can command the room, and you don't get those type of examples on television.
Mhm.
So to see that in person, just his energy was like, okay, when I'm an adult, like, and I'm working, whatever it is I'm doing, like I want to carry myself in that way. So like I didn't know the man. No one knew he was going to become president at some point, but it was just him and his presence and the example that he had, but the exposure aspect of
Mhm.
that, like me being exposed to that, and someone saying, "I'm going to take you to hear this guy speak." He's a very powerful speaker.
Mhm.
I think that you should, hear him speak. And so I'm sorry, my best friend and I at the time went with our mentor to see Barack Obama speak.
Mhm.
That's just one of many examples of like exposure and someone taking the time out of their day, out of their weekend to say, I'm going to put this guy under my wing and just show him the ropes.
That's cool, man. And I want to unpack a little bit more. And again, I know we said this is not a Morehouse ad, but however, I think for you and I, we have a lot of commonalities, right? Like single parent household, come from lesser means, found Alpha at Morehouse as well, right? And you were a little bit older than me in school, and I remember coming in freshman year and like seeing y'all become alphas. And I just was like, y'all literally felt like superheroes to me. And I'm like, man, like I gotta figure that out, because all the things that you just said about the young Barack is like legitimately Morehouse to me. And like, especially Alpha, not just Alpha, but like Omega, all the fraternities in reality, because your grades have to be really good. It's super competitive to join a fraternity at an HBCU. So the guys are really on top of their game, and they're polished. They're striving for excellence. They're doing all of these things. But can you just unpack a little bit more about just your pursuit of Alpha, and like when you got to school as well? I remember you telling me a story about you got to Morehouse with nothing, right? Like, and you showed up and you had to figure it out. How did you not only figure out getting to school with nothing? What did that look like for you? And then also like your matriculation to Alpha as well.
Yeah. Um, so I think even like before we even get over that line of going into Morehouse, during my high school years, my mom was very keen on me being independent and doing things on my own. So there was a clear line in which she stopped doing all of the things that she once did for me all the time. So whether it was washing clothes, whether it was cooking, anything that I needed to do to survive on my own, she was like, "You need to handle that. Like you need to, grow up." Right?
In high school.
In high school. So you know, taking that, and then the point I made earlier around community and the community wrapping their arms around you or around me and making sure that I was good, getting to Morehouse, it was an extension of that. So the first day that I got there, it was clear why everyone at my church was like, "Oh, you're going to Morehouse." Showed up, didn't let them know I was coming. So didn't tell Morehouse that I was coming, simply because now that I look back on it, didn't understand the true like process and how things worked in terms of going to college. Everyone just said you apply, you get in, you go. So in my head, I was like, okay, you get there and then you sign up for everything, classes, and all that kind of stuff. Showed up the first day and they were like, "Oh, we didn't know you were coming."
Yeah.
Why are you here? So I remember the gentleman stopped what he was doing, and he was running around like doing a million things at once. He literally stopped, brought my mom, myself, and my mentors, who drove me down to Morehouse. and took us over to a table and said, all right, we're going to get everything set up right now.
Mm.
So he found a dorm room for me. He signed me up for everything. He got me registered. And now I'm starting my Morehouse College journey.
Mm-hmm.
I think you put me at any other school and just show up like
Mm-hmm.
that, it wouldn't have been that smooth.
Yep.
You wouldn't have got that attention immediately, where as an individual, someone is saying, okay, let me make sure that you're good in this moment. And I don't just send you back out and say, okay, come back tomorrow at
Mm-hmm.
9 a.m. So I think that's like a testament to the school. With it being small, it allows it to do that. But then going back to that sense of community, I think, that's what got me on that road. But taking a step further, my friends who are my friends to this day, we all from the same wing of Brazil Hall,
Mm-hmm.
they were clutch. Like, I didn't have a meal plan. It took like a week for the meal
Mm-hmm.
plan to kick in. They were bringing me food, sneaking me into the car, holding me down basically for like a week, maybe 2 weeks. Like, all right, this dude doesn't have a meal plan.
Mm-hmm.
We can't leave him out by himself. So it's like those friendships that are forged in those first couple
Mm-hmm.
of days. It meant the world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and to this day, like when someone asks me like, what were key moments in your life? That week of arriving in Atlanta, Georgia from Chicago and starting my college career is like a pivotal moment,
Mm-hmm.
because I could have been by myself. I could have been a bunch of guys that didn't care. And they're like, oh, man, this guy's good luck, right? So I think there was a lack of preparation on my part and probably my mom's part. Sorry, mom, but lack of preparation there. But we showed up and we figured it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that piece is crucial, because that's like one of the core tenets for me, is like, you'll figure it out. Just keep moving in a direction, no matter what that direction is. You just don't give up and you'll figure it out. So that's kind of how I live my life. A little rogue at times. I'm like, I'll figure it out. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. I may not have the complete plan or the complete picture, but just keep pressing forward and something will shape.
Man, there's so many different avenues that I want to touch on just with everything you just shared right there, because similar to you, like I came out of high school and moved down to Atlanta with nothing. Like, we had no money, and my sister was like, look, we'll figure it out. I was like, I'm not a Georgia resident. I can't get, the Hope Scholarship. And she's like, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Just get down here. And getting down to Atlanta, we showed up. I won't name the dean. He's no longer at Morehouse. We showed up at his office almost every other day I graduated from high school, came down here, showed up almost every other day. We were taking cookies, like brownies, everything, trying to make it happen. And it was literally a week before classes started, and he blessed me with a scholarship. And that's the only reason why I was able to literally start classes. Like, had nobody to co-sign for a FAFSA, nothing. And people rallied similar to you. I didn't have, a food plan, but I had my boys that had it, and they're like, come on, man, we'll get you in. Or what do you want to eat? We'll bring you something. We'll figure it out. So hearing you share that is like, I don't know. I think it's similar to you. It's a defining moment of my life and my career. And for me, it's why in corporate America, I don't get rattled. I don't, like, nothing really bothers me. Like, there are areas where I'm like, oh, that's frustrating, but I don't take this stuff home. I don't, you can't, so I really want to, can you explain a little bit more about, like, how has the Morehouse and the HBCU experience really prepared you for corporate America?
Yeah. You sort of just said it, like, your battle. I think everyone knows if you're in the scholarship office, or in the financial aid office rather, and that entire system, hopefully it's better today than it was back then, but it teaches you resiliency. It teaches you patience. It teaches you to actually learn how to network very early without knowing that you're learning how to network. Because if you could find some type of commonality with the people that worked in the financial aid office, and they felt like they could, like, not that they owed you something, but that you were really intentional about what you were trying to do and why you were at the school, they will hold you up. And so it's all of those intangibles that you learn at Morehouse. And I would take this across HBCUs probably, in terms of just being scrappy,
Yep.
figuring it out, getting through all of those tests, whether it was registration, whether it was financial aid, whether it was finding a place to live, all those things where I wouldn't say I'm unique, you're unique, no one's unique in the area, especially when we talk about our HBCUs. But at the end of the day, it's like those lessons lend a hand to you in your adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, going into the workforce, there were a couple of things that I feel like set me up for success. One being battle tested, right?
Mm.
So sort of knowing who you are. Morehouse had a big hand in that, but then the confidence part, I think going back to our earlier part of our conversation, how you're brought up, growing up in the city, not having anything, um, you don't know what you don't have,
Mhm.
right? And so whether it's Section 8, food stamps, insert here government assistance program, we had it.
Mhm.
But it wasn't seen as being less than. It wasn't seen as I'm inferior to someone else. And growing up, being in school with Black people my entire life, I think further like strengthened that because I didn't have a complex of trying to fit in with any other group of people because all I knew were my people.
Mhm.
And so getting to Morehouse, it was almost an extension of high school for me in terms
Mm.
of meeting different people from different places, and that was the true difference. But being at a school where it was everyone that looks like me, I was used to that.
Mhm.
And so I realized that some people got there and they're like, this has not been my reality.
Mhm.
I'm used to being the minority and now I'm in the majority.
Mhm.
It's a great experience. Whereas, I'll speak for myself. I was like, this is part of the course. I'm used to this. Right?
Mhm.
But I think going into corporate America after school, there were things that I was oblivious to because I did not, grow up around any other people besides myself.
Mm.
So I didn't feel like I needed to fit in. I just felt like I was enough. I didn't feel like I needed to truly change who I was in order to be successful. Now, I say that's a gift and a curse because, when you talk about corporate America, I think, I went into it thinking as long as I'm smart enough, I'll get ahead.
Mm. Mm.
And
Mm.
that was the wrong
Mhm.
way to think about it, because it's full of smart people. It's
Mhm.
full of people that, especially when you talk about being at the Big Four, everyone in there is smart in some capacity.
Mhm.
Everyone comes from some MBA program
Yeah.
or some top tier school. So being smart is not enough, and that's where you have to tap back into the whole networking thing. Well, getting a little bit of that from Morehouse was super helpful. Learning how to navigate spaces, but then also learning how to play that game of corporate
Mm.
America. I think when people hear that, they say like, oh, they think of it as a negative. Learning to play the game is not a negative. Like you're learning how to operate in the space that you've been placed in.
Mm.
And so at work, for me, it is more about how do I understand where I'm operating, what I'm doing, and who I'm doing it with. So understanding people, right? I think that's been critically important for me because if you understand how to interact with people, if you understand what makes other people tick, then you can adjust yourself as you operate or interact with those people.
Mhm.
There's this aspect of duality, most people feel like I never felt like I had to completely change who I was at my core,
Mhm.
but I knew I couldn't go into this space that I am the minority and bring this cultural aspect that other people can't identify
Mhm.
because then you are climbing up a tree with one leg. Like
Uh-huh.
honestly, like you're trying to say like I'm bringing all this stuff into a space that no one else cares
Mhm.
about. So why bring it?
Mhm.
So there's an aspect of leaving it at the door, but not changing who you are at your core and your values, right? And so respect is big for me. Like I will always maintain respect if I feel like someone is not necessarily extending that respect to me. Um, then I'm very upfront about that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And at the end of the day, those things start to help shape your career. And I think early in my career, I relied too much on I'm smart.
Mhm.
Everyone knows I can do work. That's going to be enough.
Mhm.
Well, after you get passed up for the first promotion, and you see the people around you getting promoted. You're like, wait a minute, like you're telling me I'm a one performer or I'm a top performer,
Mhm.
but I didn't get the promotion, right? So that first lesson was you've got to be an advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
And that was the biggest thing that helped me turn the corner from a corporate perspective is if you're not advocating for yourself, then others don't know what you're doing. And when they're in the room looking at those lists of who's ready for promotion, who's going to get promoted, if they have to cut that list, or if they don't even know that you should be on the list because you haven't been advocating for yourself. So that was a lesson that I learned early, and then go a couple more years more, and it came to a point where is what I'm doing providing value.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think no matter what your career is, there's always that value component, and the more value that you're providing, the more that people, one, will gravitate towards you, but two, consider you a key player in whatever it is that you're doing. And so I started to pick my head up and look around and say, okay, the work that I'm doing, I know it's this, but what's that marketplace look like?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll speak directly for the work that I do within consulting. You've got to understand, like, what's the marketplace? What is it that people care about? And how do you provide value to them? And that changes every couple of years, whether it's driven by the political landscape,
Mm-hmm.
driven by the economy. Corporations' priorities change. And so in the work that I do with security, cybersecurity, it's like, you've got to figure out how to make that valuable to people because it costs them something, but it doesn't drive profit.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
You got it.
without getting too far into like all of the isms of what I do, what started to lend a hand to driving my career was understanding the market and understanding how I play in that and anticipating what it was that clients need and want. And then in my conversations with them, they could see that.
Mm-hmm.
They say, okay, this guy gets it. I consider this guy a trusted advisor to me. And in the consulting world, that's the key to success. You've got to build your book of clients, and the only way to build that book is to have clients that trust you, respect you. But to get to that point, you've got to see the bigger picture. You've got to understand that you're not here just to do this one thing over and over again.
Yeah, it's good, man. And again, you hit on a lot of key topics that I think are imperative that we have to navigate through, especially the first, like, call it 5 to 8 years of your career. An area that I would love for you to dive a little deeper in is, and bear with me as I try to, gather the words. So for me, my story, like from Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, however, don't come from anything. So your story of like, I've been around Black people. This is my culture. I got to Morehouse and like, this was like, like more of the same. And for me, I got to Morehouse and it was culture shock. I was like, I haven't been around this many Black boys before in my entire life. And then I'm like, I'm seeing guys that I'm like, you speak like me, you enunciate your words like me, you are driven, you want everything and some in your career, right? It was a great, great, great environment. But then you pivot out of Morehouse and you pivot into corporate America and you're like, where did everybody go? And I'm back on this island and I'm here. And I think some people are good at corporate America and the duality and all of those pieces of like navigating the space. But I guess what I'm looking for you to unpack is like the whole topic of like code switching, right? Like people will I've been called out for it before where it's like people that don't know me and I'm in corporate America, they're like, oh, you code switch. It's like, whoa. This is how I've always spoke. This is how I always treat people and care. Yeah, I may not come into work when I had hair with a do-rag on. I may not come into work with using slang or super comfortable, but I'm also not going into church like that.
Exactly.
And my church is Black, right? Like, it's so for me, can you speak a little bit more about just like duality and like how you view it and how you're able to balance just being true to yourself, being true to your culture, but then also like thriving and having a really healthy career in the corporate space?
I look at code switching as the easy way out for people when they try to call that out to say, oh, you code switch. To your point, you don't show up to church with your do-rag on.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't go to a football game with your baseball jersey on. Or if you were a football player, you wouldn't show up with the baseball jersey. Point being, you can put whatever analogy you want into it.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, it goes back to that kind of, you dress for the part, you dress for the role in which you want, you dress for the job in which you want. You also have to act that way. To me, code switching was never about me changing to be what's to fit the mode of someone else, because then you are, in my opinion, acknowledging that there's a superiority to who you are. And so whoever said that, to enunciate your words and to, have a calm demeanor was reserved for white people
Right.
or some other race. So when people say you're code switching, it's like, well, or am I just speaking? And I'm not around my friends at work. It's equivalent to how you speak with your friends versus your family. And so there are two different things: how you speak to your friends versus your wife or your partner. Those things are different. So it's no different than when you enter the workforce or you're in corporate America, that you are speaking different to fit where you are, the room that you're in. And so I never felt like I was code switching. I just felt like I was operating as intended in a space that if I did it, I wouldn't be successful. So then I need to make a conscious decision on, if I don't want to, and we'll use the term code switch. If I don't want to code switch, then is this the right job for me? Because at the end of the day, for me, it was a means, it is a means to an end, right? And so, sure, if I don't want to, operate or behave in a way that is different from the majority in corporate America, if I don't want to code switch in that way, then I have to acknowledge that my success is only going to be so far, and there's a ceiling that I'm going to hit. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's code switching. I just think that you're setting yourself up for something.
Yeah, it's good, man. And I couldn't agree with you anymore. And it's funny because you called out something that I've always thought in my head is like the handful of full of people that have had the courage to like say that to me. I've always looked at them and then also like looked at their career. I'm like, it's not the fact that it's like the fact that like you were just trying to place blame on everybody else other than just looking inwardly and realizing that like, I just got to put my head down and make it about the work, So I appreciate you sharing that because it makes me, again, like for me, I'm in my mid 30s, like I still struggle with that in my head from time to time where I'm like, well, am I like being true to the culture? I'm like, but hold on, I'm Black. Like I'm going to always be true to the culture. It's just, am I being true to Ben is really the question. And like, as soon as I go back to that question, that's when I feel authentically like sound and happy,
Piece is that, and I think it's starting to go away, but what people consider code switching is, at its simplest form, you are enunciating your words, you are communicating effectively. Well, communicating effectively is a core tenet in any workplace. Right? If the people that I'm talking to can't understand what I'm saying, how effective can I be? Now, if there's a difference, right? Like if you were at a job and everyone's coloring their hair red, and then you go and you color your hair red, then that's kind of you're losing who you are and what you're about. But in my opinion, at its simplest form, people, call code switching is when they hear you articulating your words and effectively communicating. And so I would tell any young man that is coming out of school or early in their career who's trying to figure out, like, am I doing too much at work? Am I code switching? At the end of the day, I would just tell them to ask themselves, do you feel like you're a different person and you're putting on an entire mask and costume when you're at work? Or do you feel like you're just making small tweaks in order to excel, in order to fit in? Because if you take that negative connotation away from fitting in, the entire goal is to be a part of the team that you are a part of at work. There are very few jobs where you work independently. And so at the core of every team is fit. And if you don't fit within that team, then you're not going to be successful. Where the only way to fit is to make small tweaks and changes about yourself to fit that team that you're a part of. So that's what I would say to anyone that's like trying to figure out like, what's the deal with code switching? At the end of the day, how do you feel when you leave that environment? If you feel bad, if you feel like I can't keep doing this, I'm changing so much about myself, then stop doing it.
Yeah, it's good, man. Thank you for that. So you're a senior manager now at Deloitte, one more level, which is partner, right? If that's what you want to pursue.
So can you share a little bit more, because you hit on, emotional intelligence, right? Like in the workspace. Can you share more about what it has taken for you to advance your career to, one, become a senior manager at a Big Four firm, and then two, what is the advice that you would give to the generation coming behind us that's pursuing corporate America and trying to navigate and advance their careers as well? Like, what should they be focusing on?
Yeah. So you mentioned emotional intelligence. And I think that's very critical because, again, no matter what your career is, you've got to understand how to interact with people around you, but then you also have to understand what makes you tick.
Mhm.
And so even bridging the gap with what we were talking about with code switching, the way that you have to look at it is that there's a clear cultural difference between Black people and every other uh, race out there.
Mhm.
Race out there. And when you take that into account, the easiest thing to pinpoint is passive aggressiveness.
Mhm.
And in the corporate world, I don't care what company it is, the common way of interacting with everyone is being passively aggressive when something's going wrong and if there's conflict or if someone doesn't like what you're doing. And I think I won't speak for the entire Black community, but we don't do well with passive aggressiveness. We can pinpoint it and we know, like, okay, that's not what you're really trying to say. So why don't we just talk about it, right? And so with knowing that, that's a part of like the emotional intelligence piece where sure, you could flare up at someone and you can let them know how you really feel about it, but then you're the odd guy in the room. And you play into all of those tropes and misconceptions about us as a people, because people are going to say you're aggressive or you don't get well with others. You don't know how to be a team player simply because you weren't passive aggressive
Yep.
and you were very direct with someone. And so I think considering like you understanding how your emotions are regulated and how you react to certain things, the more that you can control how you react to things, the more that you are in the driver's seat of what happens in the corporate space. And so oftentimes when I know people that are leaving my firm, I'm like, well, why are you leaving? And they were like, I had a really bad interaction with a partner who, treated them a certain way or said something to them or continued to say things to them that they felt like were disrespectful. And, not to get into the details of it, I think there's an element of leaving that at the door. Because you're going to continue to interact with people that are not going to give you the energy that you would expect or that you would give to someone else. And so when that happens, it becomes this internal game of how do I react to this? Do I let it go? Do I address it head on? What's the best way to deliver the message that I want to deliver in response to this without jeopardizing my job, without jeopardizing my career? And there have been a handful of moments throughout the years where I have had to have that conversation with myself because in the moment I'm like, all right, what's happening right now, I could fly off the handle or I could just, handle this the right way. And there's never been a case where it's something that like we're about to fight,
Yeah.
but that earlier I mentioned respect,
Mhm,
right? Feeling disrespected,
Yep.
or feeling not valued or someone undermining you, all those things come into play. And so entering year, what is it, 14, no, 12, entering year 12 at this company, um, the one thing that stays consistent is understanding what makes me tick, what are my, what drives me, and anticipating when those moments are going to come and how I'm going to react. Because once I'm in them, there's only a split second to control my reaction. But then also, and I don't want to make it sound negative, but on the positive side of things, it's how you treat other people. And that gets you just as far. And so, I'm very intentional about the people that I manage to understand, like, I'm not one of those people that are going to, micromanage you, treat you as less just because you have a lower title than me, right? And I'm also not the person that's not going to give opportunities to folks because I don't feel like they're not ready or because I feel like they're too junior or whatever the case may be. So, even though there's this, I think there's this point in which you have to look at both sides to say emotional intelligence of what drives me, but then understanding what drives other people.
Yeah.
And that is when and the longevity of my career, not feeling like, okay, I need to leave this place because something isn't working out. Because just as much as I'm expecting something from it, there's a level of me giving something to it.
Yep.
And so when you talk about developing others and putting other people in a place for an opportunity for them to grow, that only kind of amplifies your value within the company, and that contributes to promotions as well.
Yeah. Listen, I knew what this was going to be before we sat down and had it. So I appreciate you. And I just a few more questions, but you hit on, again, so many things that I think are just very, very valuable and important as we navigate this corporate space. Even one of the things that you didn't directly just call out, but all I kept thinking in my head is just like the importance of reading the room, right? Like reading the room, reading the room, reading the room. And it's not even only in corporate America. If I'm being honest with you, it's at home with my wife, with my sisters, with my mom, right? Like there are instances I had a conversation, not to share too intimately, with my mom. I didn't realize that, like, I offended my mom the other day, and my older sister called me and she was like, "Hey," it was so small to me, but I'm like, it was small to me, but it was a big deal to her. And I misread that, and that's on me. So I had to call her to apologize. There's a toy that my mom purchased for my son that my mom had been seeing sit in a box in the corner where all the other toys are for like a year. And I'm thinking, I thought that I bought the toy, and I'm like, he doesn't care. Like, it's no big deal. So she's frustrated. She's unhappy. And then my older sister Kia told me about it. And I was like, oh my God, like I had no idea. I misread that for a year. So the very first thing that I did, and it's the same thing that I do in the corporate space, it cost me nothing to be kind.
Yep.
Absolutely nothing. It cost me nothing to be kind. Just as easy, if I'm going to be in a bad mood for no reason, I need to absolutely be in a good mood for no reason at all. I force that every single day. So I now, Jay Green, like I have shifted my mindset even this year, where I get out of bed and rather than being like, I gotta go to work, I'm like, no, I get to do this. I get to go and make this type of money and have an impact at an organization that wants my opinion, that asks for my opinion, that takes care of my family, that provides for me, that gives me the space and the grace to go and handle the things I need to handle outside of this office, right? Like, so it's a mindset thing for me. And it's a being positive, being kind, giving those that are below you opportunities, right? Like, cause it's very easy. If I didn't know you and to see you as a senior manager at a Big Four, I'm like, oh, he's unapproachable. Like, he's probably a little bit rude. Or it's like, no, I couldn't be any more nice, kind, so I think that's amazing. I do want to, just a few more quick questions. One of the questions that I've heard you say before, and this is a quote, if your work is not serving the future of the marketplace, then your work and you will expire. So how do you ensure that your work remains relevant and impactful to your employer?
Um, I might have kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I think no matter what career you're in, it's vitally important that you understand the role that you play in said career and how you provide value to that. You could be a teacher. Your marketplace are students and families. You can be a doctor. Of course, your marketplace is the patients. And the quicker that you understand how to provide value to the market, then you become valuable in and of yourself. And so, again, I'll take it back to if there is someone saying, hey, I'm early in my career and I'm trying to figure out how to jumpstart this thing, like how to ignite my career, how to get going. You, what I always tell folks is like, what's your value prop? It's never too early to come up with what that value proposition is. Some people may call it like a part of their elevator pitch. But ultimately, you want to be known for doing something well. What's that thing so that in other people's minds, they know, like, I know I can go to Ben for this. And what that does is it lends a hand to when you're not in the room, allowing those folks that are your champion to speak on your behalf. Because if people don't know like what your value is and what you bring to the table, how do you expect to get a seat at the table?
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that you can just walk up to and pull out and sit yourself. So you need to enable other people to speak on your behalf. And then that is what kind of pushes the needle on that. So knowing the marketplace is just knowing, like, it's a generic term that I used to say, know where you operate and how that supports your career or the job that you have, because that is only going to make you more valuable to the person that you work for. And with the boom and everyone wanting to be an entrepreneur, nothing changes. You still need to know your market value.
Mm-hmm.
You still need to know who your audience is. You still need to know who your customer is. I don't care what you're doing as an entrepreneur. At the end of the day, it's super important for you to know, like, what the market is, how that market changes, what drives the market, and then you figure out, okay, what's my value prop within that?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I try to do. And I think that's what's helped in the past few years. 2020, I think it was, as I made that transition from manager to senior manager, during the height of the pandemic,
Mm.
it immediately became clear that, okay, I can't network in person anymore.
Yep.
So it's much harder to drive, those new opportunities and close deals, because I can't just have a drink with someone.
Yep.
We shake hands, I go back, I draw up the paperwork. I can't do that. And in the world of consulting, that is the life. That's your livelihood.
Yep.
Especially once you hit senior manager,
You kill what you eat.
you got to kill what you eat. So at the end of the day, it was like, okay, I've got to make sure that I understand how this market is evolving. And I think it was probably the best time, because during the pandemic, everything became remote.
Mm-hmm.
And in the work that I do with coming up with, security strategy, it is like, that was like it was the best time to be alive.
Yeah.
Everyone immediately gets to know, like, what do I do? Like, I now have this extended enterprise where everyone's not coming into a building. I've got all of these, like, laptops out in the world connecting back to my environment.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not to make this about work, but the point was, I quickly understood that, and I said, how's this going to drive the type of work that I do, so that I can shape the conversations with my clients, so that then they feel like, okay, this guy is really a trusted advisor to me, because he sort of he understands my business, number one.
Mm.
He understands what drives money for my business, and how do I protect that from a tech perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I think that has helped me sort of maintain my position to continue to advance.
That's good, man. And super, just, I think it's value add for people to hear that. And my last question for you is, what do you want your legacy to be when it's all said and done? Or is legacy important to you?
It's funny you added that last part. I don't think legacy, not in its truest sense, but I do, my biggest goal in life is to create normal people. I'm speaking about my son and my son that's on the way. It's one of those things where I want to give him all the mentorship, both of them, the mentorship and guidance, and all the things that I didn't have. I want to unlock that potential as they are in their early formative years, so that they are sort of figuring it out on their own. And I want to leave behind something for them, so that when they do become of age, they're not restricted by either working for someone, or restricted by not knowing what the endless opportunities are for them out there. And so that's what my mission is and my goal. And then after I'm gone, I just want people to say, like, all right, this guy, he cared about his community, gave back, and gave back with his time, not just financially, but like, he put time in to reach back and bring other people, help bring other people up. And just, like I said, just being a normal person. I would hate for anybody to say, like, oh, this guy was an a-hole, or, this guy really did people wrong. He stole from them, or things like that. Like, that's my mission, is to never, ever do anything to give anyone a reason to say that. So legacy in its truest form, it's not so much external in terms of, having a building named after me or something like that. But it's just leaving behind, generically speaking, leaving the world a better place. And that world is my family. So raising kids and helping them to be respectable and respectful.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, man, I appreciate your time more than you know. One, like, I look up to you, I admire you. I think you're an exceptional man. I think you're an exceptional leader, brother, friend, all of the things. And like your willingness to always answer the phone, help, give guidance, direction, not just to myself, but like anybody that reaches out to you is something that needs to be applauded. And again, that's a large purpose and part of like what I'm trying to build here is for people to have an opportunity to be exposed to more men like you. Cause I think that like it's easy for us to, we have enough contacts at Morehouse. We have enough people that mentees that will reach out to us, but it's like, no, there's so many other people that will never know a Jonathan Green until we put you out there that need to know a Jonathan Green and know that you can come from hardships in Chicago. You can come to school underprepared and not know what's going on and figure it out. You can come into corporate America and scale and have an exceptional career, make senior manager, probably partner in the next couple of years if that's what you desire to do, have an exceptional family, be an honest man, right? Like, and have a beautiful marriage. So for me, know that those are the things that really just continue to have me captivated by your presence. So thank you for being my brother. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being a mentor and somebody that I look up to and aspire to be.
Likewise.
If you ever need anything from me, man, I'm here. And thanks for being on the platform.
Likewise. And it goes both ways. You're an inspiration as well. I think there's always something to be learned both ways, even though you're younger than me.
Mm.
You are still very intentional about what's important to you and staying unique to your core. And so that's just a refreshing reminder that I should continue to do the same. And like I said earlier, like what you're doing with this platform, I think is amazing. I don't consider my story unique. I think there are probably a number of other people out there that have the same story. So my hope is that, this reaches the one person that is becoming an adult, coming into their adulthood, and they say, oh, there's someone that's living the same life or lived the same life that I'm living. And there is a path to something greater and has some level of inspiration from our conversation today.
And I appreciate you, man.
Really.
Love you, bro.
Love you too.
All right, man. Take care.